Yeah, thank you. I'm going to call it to order this evening's Linn-Wilsonville School Board meeting. I'm going to pass it to Director Douglas for the roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Shoemaker,
Here.
Director Sloop,
Here.
Chair Taylor,
Present.
Vice Chair Wyatt,
Here.
Director Vidal.
Here.
Thank you.
Wow.
All right. We're going to have something a little bit different this evening than we traditionally do. Um, This was a board meeting that originally was on our calendar as a special board meeting. There would be no public comment for this meeting, but as a board, we took a vote amongst ourselves, and because of the topic of the meeting and um, the heightened, um, I guess, interest in this meeting, we decided as a board that we would have a public comment section. We also had conflicting events this evening for some of our elementary schools, primary schools, however you refer to them. They have their traditional OMSI night, so this meeting was moved forward to allow those parents who will be attending OMSI night in just a little bit the opportunity to be able to listen to public comment or come forward and present the board with their own public comments. So we don't traditionally meet at 4:30, but we wanted to do that. And we are also going to do something a little different. We're going to have public comment first, which is not something that we traditionally do, in the spirit of allowing these parents to transition from here to Portland with traffic. So if you didn't get the opportunity to sign up on the public comment sheet, just raise your hand if I've missed anyone, and we'll make sure that at the end of this, we'll give you the opportunity to address the board and make your comment. We may have some folks who haven't gone through public comment before. Usually at our board meetings, we have kind of people that are familiar with that process. So I will do something that I normally don't do. I don't normally go through every single rule, which is quite substantial. But since we have probably some first timers, I want to let you know what public comment is and what it isn't. So in the spirit of that, I'll just read this. You can bear with me. I'm a little plugged up tonight. I've been sick for a while, so if I fumble my words or something like that, I just ask you for a little grace. All right. So public comment. Thank you for taking the time today to share with us and take part in this public comment section. If you wish to make a public comment, please sign up on the sheet. As I mentioned, if you haven't signed up, I will come back and ask if you'd like to come forward. Just hold up your hand and we'll look to try to find you. It is very bright up here, so I can't see your faces. I can see bodies, so just know that. The public comment is a time the board uses to collect information rather than engage in dialogue. So this is not a town hall, if you will. We will not respond to you. The board encourages speakers not to mistake the board silent for a lack of interest or care. We are listening carefully and probably taking notes. So if you see us write some notes, we might be wanting to remember you or send you an email or something. If you're asking the district or board to respond or provide information, please provide your contact information with the district or the board secretary so that the appropriate person may follow up with you. The public comment time is not a forum or a singling out individuals in the district or employees or students for complaints. If you have a complaint about an individual, student, or district employee, please do not mention them by name or provide information that would allow for them to be identified. Please use the district complaint process accessible on our website to help resolve individual situations or concerns. The public comment time is for addressing the board and not an audience. So this is not your soapbox moment or your audition for something else. All comments will be given their due respect by the board. And if you have a member of the audience who is speaking, we ask that you're courteous. We ask that you have no clapping, no booing. There will be other people who haven't given public comment before or who have a fear of public speaking. And claps and boos do not create a welcoming environment. We can take it. We have thick skin, so it's not about us. It's about the people who may not be comfortable speaking. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. If 3 minutes is not enough time, you're welcome to reach out to the district office or board at a later time or submit materials to the board or district that you would like us to see. The order of public comment that will be taken: residents in person addressing the board will go first. Residents remotely addressing the board will go next. And we do not have any public comment that is virtual or remote, so we won't have to worry about that today. Non-residents, no address provided in person addressing the board, and non-residents, no address provided remotely addressing the board. So if there are more requests for public comment than our time may allow, I may organize public comment speakers to be limited to a certain time or topic. Depending on the number that we have, I can adjust that a little bit. And if time allows, remaining speakers on the same topics will may be permitted to speak, depending on how long we go. What I would like to do with this list is really find out, typically I will go in order of sign up, but in the spirit of trying to get some of the parents who have to transition out of here, I'm going to start with those parents from Cedar Oak, Stafford, or excuse me, Cedar Oak and Bolton, who have their OMSI night this evening. So if you are not from Cedar Oak or Bolton, I'm going to ask that you'll allow me to come back to you. And I'm going to go to the next name. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. And some of the names I will recognize and I will know that you're not one of those parents, but I don't know every name on here. And we will jump right into it. Is Luke Weinbreck, are you with okay, I'm gonna come back to you then, please. Amanda Brookshire, are you with Cedar Oak or oh yeah, then come on up. Then come on. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not going. I'm sorry, you're not going. So I'll come back to you. Aria Graham? Not going on, Z? Okay. Zeal, are you all right? Welcome.
You got it.
That's the first time.
First time
I know.
out of like, we're on what, our like seventh meeting? So yay. Hopefully this is our last one.
She has the capacity to learn.
I'm going to keep it really short tonight. I signed up later so that I would have time to think about what to say, but I think I really only have one last question or point for deliberation for your thought process tonight. We got an email earlier today talking about the sale of Oppenlander, which is, of course, no surprise. You know, you brought it up in the last board meeting. I would love to understand how the funds that would come from the sale of Oppenlander would help close the deficit, or at least partially close the deficit, if that money is to be used for land purchase. How are we able to use it to help kind of stem the gap? So that's my only question tonight. And thank you. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you. All right. Paige, are you okay, I'm gonna then I'll come back to you. Is it Eileen? Aline? Okay. And Barbara Stratt? Okay, come back. And Athena Contreras? Are you headed to OMSI this evening? Okay, so I'll come back to you then. Thank you. And PK Runkles, are you at Bolton or Cedar Oak? Okay. And Rachel Beavers, are you? Okay. All right. So, well, I'm glad we moved that up. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the top and go back to normal order, and there's not a whole lot of public comments, so I'm just gonna go in the order, and I'm not gonna go in order of topic. I'm just gonna let each person address us, and we'll move on through. All right. Luke Weinbreck.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Luke Weinbrecht. I'm also here with other board members, Kate, Jesse, and Carla. And we are speaking tonight on behalf of the parent-teacher organization at Sunset Primary School. We appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns regarding the proposed school consolidations and their impact on the Sunset Primary students and families. First and foremost, we understand the difficult budgetary decisions facing the district. We want to thank the board for taking time to consider the many impacts school closures would inevitably have on the children and families in our community. We are here tonight to address the concerns brought forward by our community members regarding the proposed reassignment of Sunset students from Rosemont Ridge Middle School to Athey Creek Middle School if the district proceeds with closing certain small schools. This decision would disrupt one aspect, what makes Sunset a thriving neighborhood, school, a sense of community and proximity that extends beyond the elementary years. Sunset Primary is one of the only elementary schools in the district that has students who live within walking boundary of Rosemont Ridge Middle School. Some students within the Sunset community have homes directly across the street from the middle school. Studies consistently demonstrate the benefit of attending local schools. Walking or biking to school fosters physical and mental well-being and improves academic performance by allowing students to begin their day more focused and ready to learn. Many Sunset families chose their homes specifically for the proximity to Rosemont Ridge Middle School, planning for their students or their children to seemingly transition from elementary to middle school alongside friends and neighbors. Assigning Sunset students to Athey Creek would upend those plans, forcing children on longer bus rides and increasing traffic in areas ill-equipped to handle it. Not only is this unnecessary busing a hindrance to families and the community, it is an additional monetary cost to our district at a time when we have no extra funds to spare. Additionally, a reassignment would erode the strong community bonds our families have built over years of shared experiences between Sunset Primary and Rosemont Ridge. Sunset families frequently volunteer, participate in events, and contribute to the success of not only our elementary school, but Rosemont Ridge as well. By fragmenting this community, we risk losing the parent engagement that is critical to student success. The community feedback is clear. Parents are deeply concerned about the impact of these changes. They are frustrated by the lack of transparent communication about the reassignment and feel these decisions disproportionately burden families and students. We urge the board to reevaluate the proposed reassignment and ensure that students are assigned to the school closest to where they live. Rosemont Ridge is within walking distance from most Sunset families. It's not just a convenience, but a necessity for working parents and a cornerstone of our children's education and well-being. We believe that there are better ways to address budget constraints without sacrificing community cohesion or educational experience for our students. Thank you for taking the time to consider this. I also have copies of our statement if you'd like.
And we had some new speakers. And so I'm going to go back and just check to see if any of them are looking forward to hopping into traffic over to OMSI. So Ursula, are you from Bolton or Cedar Oak? You stand? All right, welcome. John Armstrong, are you from Bolton or Cedar Oak? And are you going to OMSI night? Okay, come on up.
Thank you all for the opportunity and for listening and hearing us all out. I think I've, expressed it to you before, particularly at Bolton. My daughter's at Bolton. We trust you guys. We trust the process. We trust the district because when we look at it, we've seen the results with our kids. My daughter's been in there for 3 years now. I've seen how great she's done. We see all of that and we see the results in our own children, our own communities, the people we know, the kids that we see every day. And I think the one thing that becomes clear is like, we've seen kind of felt a lack of transparency with it throughout the process, not knowing what our options were necessarily, being asked to provide options on our own, all of those things. And we want to keep that trust and we want to build on it. And we look at it that represent us when you make that decision, because voting to close those schools doesn't represent our communities. It simply does not. And, when we think about that and we think about the bond, that has to be considered. If the schools close, that we can't approve that bond. We can get out there and we can campaign against it if we have to, but we can't. And when we look at the other things that you are our representatives, to vote against that breaks that trust for us. And so I just wanted to have my chance to get here and say that, because we do look at you as our public servants and representatives, and it just doesn't feel like it represents our community to close them. Thank you.
Christy Lance, are you going to OMSI night or no? All right. We'll go back. Dean Sir. I'm okay, but we're not going in order tonight.
Good evening, Dean Sir, here in West Linn. You gave us the comfortable seats, a lot of people staying, so appreciate that. I want to read you something. Education must be balanced. The whole person, intellectually, emotionally, physically, ethically. Uniqueness must be cherished, and we must consider each student as part of the community, this community, from birth through life. The development of character is essential in the education of the child. That's part of the West Linn vision. We're not in the district headquarters, so I don't know if that's up on the wall or not. But small schools and Oppenlander, the actions that you're proposing are connected. They're tied together by the budget. Both are sacrificing this theme of the district's vision statement and short-term, in my opinion, short-term and inappropriate patches to the district's budget shortfall. In Oppenlander, we're talking about taking land banking resources and cash and turning that into short-term reserves and short-term operational expenses. And with the closure of schools, the discussion that I've heard, I'm not intimate with that because I'm long past that with my kids. But with the closure of schools, we're talking about breaking up communities and local unity that those students have, all in support of that vision. In my opinion, none of today's budget problems are a surprise. The staff and the board have been talking about these things. We've had this on and off for a long time. I look back at the comment from the last board meeting where it was described that PERS has a side account to help us manage the expenses of PERS. We've been dealing with these issues. There's not a big surprise in the expenses of the small schools. So I'm disappointed, but I'm also hopeful. Others are going to speak about small schools today, but I'm disappointed relative to Oppenlander. I'm the founder of the Friends of Oppenlander. It has a 40-plus year history in this community supporting that vision, growing kids, growing youth, growing respect, providing alternatives to screens. And the school district is turning their back on that. They are not working with the city. You've issued a demand to the city. You either do this with Oppenlander in terms of price and terms, and you're not meeting with the city. You've denied their request to meet. You've denied our request to meet. Friends of Oppenlander has asked that that you meet with us. We actually want to write some checks. I don't believe that you're acting in good faith that you've talked about for the last year or two. But I'm hopeful, as the last gentleman said, that you, the board, who work for us, will represent us and the community. And likewise, you, the board, will hold the district staff accountable, because that's how we get our accountability in there. That if you're not getting what you need in terms of information or choices or alternatives for any of these proposed decisions, don't just assume there's only one way. You need to take your time, you need to deliberate, and you need to ask for those extra questions. I'm asking that the district come back to the table with Oppenlander. We're asking that we can have a good faith negotiation that's win-win-win for the city, for the community, and for the school district. We love our school, love this beautiful facility, but we've got to be working together for this. Thank you all. Appreciate your hard work.
Amanda Brookshire.
Hi, my name's Amanda Brookshire Gardner. I just want to thank you again for all the hard work you do for this district, for our children, and doing the hard work of representing the voters in a representative democracy. The job of hearing what people you represent have to say can be thankless, and it's a thankless task. And I just want to say thanks again for this service to all of you. As residents of this district, we have trusted you, not only with our votes, but also with our pocketbooks. We have passed every bond, every levy that you have deemed necessary. And we have supported you as our trusted leaders. You have guided this district. I feel confident that when the possibility of closing our schools due to budget shortfalls was proposed, you have heard what the people you represent have to say and what they're asking of you. And we appreciate you, and we will continue to support this district. And we appreciate that you have done your job to listen, and we'll be here for you and support you in what is obviously going to be a tough financial year to come. Thank you for your time.
Aria Graham.
Hi, it's me again, Arya Graham from Bolton Primary School. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. I heard you were making decisions today and wanted to talk to you one last time before you decide what to do. If Bolton is shut down, a lot of bad things will happen, like the teachers would lose their jobs, the kids would be separated from their friends, and everybody would be so sad. My little sister even said she would not go to school again if Bolton is closed. You would break a community. Bolton is a family forever and ever. We love each other, and we all love Bolton. We all think it is the best school. We want to keep our teachers like Miss Clearwater, Mr. Porter, Miss Nelson, Miss P, Miss Amber, Miss H, Miss B, and Miss Liston. We love our teachers so much, and they love us a lot too. And we all love Bolton. Please do not close down Bolton. I am asking that you find another way. We will do more fundraisers if we need to, or please come up with a different idea. We are the Bolton Bees. We are kind. We are friends. We are a community. We are family. No matter what comes our way, we will face it together. Please do not close Bolton. Thank you for your time.
Paige Stevens.
Sure how I'm going to follow that. My name is Paige Stevens. I am a member of the Westland community and a parent of a first grader at Bolton. Um, Thank you guys for taking the time to be here tonight. Thank you to a couple of you who I've had the honor of having coffee with and discussing my concerns with about the small school closures. My husband and daughter and I moved to the Bolton neighborhood during the pandemic. I'm a nurse, so I didn't get to work from home. And having an only child, it was a tough time. We immediately, when we moved to our neighborhood, which is the street right behind Bolton, found that there are 5 other first graders on our block. We instantly had a family and a community and a neighborhood that they just don't make anymore. So I just wanted to say it's not just the size of the classes, it's not just the school, it's a family to us, and it's a representation of our entire neighborhood, who we are, the Halloween decorations that we put out, it's all for our kids. And it's great to have this neighborhood where my kid can actually play in my front yard with other kids her age, and we're not scared for them. And I'm worried that if we no longer have our school, our neighborhood is less desirable for younger new families, and that won't be the case anymore. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you vote no against the small school closure. Thank you.
Eileen Samanto. I'm sorry, in my coughing, I couldn't hear a word you said. What was that? Okay, thank you. I've got a cough that just won't go away. So I apologize this evening if you hear me up here hacking away. I've got plenty of cough drops, but we'll see if they work. Barbara Stratt.
Hello, amazing board. I've spoken many times in front of you guys, and I just so appreciate how much you've shown up. And I'm reading tonight on behalf of the Small School Alliance. The community was asked, when do small schools become too small? I believe we have discovered the answer. Thanks to Small Schools Task Force, 2 studies were brought to light. Both declared that on average, the research indicates that the effective size for elementary school is in the range of 300 to 400 students. So does this research play out in our own district? Dr. Prayer has been known to say that over 600 is too large for a community. And what is our ideal size? Well, for academics, absolutely. Trillium is the only school above 400 that scores above average, but it also has the least disadvantaged student population of any school, both in terms of economically disadvantaged and special education. Even when our schools barely scrape over 400, the academics begin to fall. The schools with the most disadvantaged students plummet the fastest. What about the school climate and student satisfaction? Thanks to the Small School Task Force meetings, the district was tasked to produce the school's panorama studies results. Again, a greater proportion of smaller schools rank higher than average for student reported well-being. What about the cost effectiveness? What about the economies of scale? In business, economies of scales produce cheaper results. How about for schools? Concern not about products and commerce than human performance? The above mentioned Hanover study determined that educational costs take the U shape, meaning that schools below an optimal level are more expensive per pupil, but schools above an optimal level also increase per pupil expenditures. In conclusion, the available research tends to show that while there are financial benefits to larger schools, the cost savings only realized until a certain point, and the very small schools and very large schools are generally the most expensive to operate. Is that true of our school district too? Yes. Boone's Ferry, 498, the largest, and Bolton, the smallest, are both the most expensive schools in our district, far above the average. Well, what about the under average? Can schools be cost effective again between 300 and 400 students? Again, yes. The last released numbers are from the 2023 when Cedar Oak was at 330, and it still falls below average. It is comparative to Bachman, who soars above 460, more than 100 students more. But is this just as cost effective in per student expenditures? So we know our students are happiest, perform the best, and cost below average when we keep our schools between 300 and 400 students. Thanks to the district's investigation, however tense as it has been, we now know that this district is capable of creating happy, successful students at below average cost. With 6 schools in Westland and 4 schools in Wilsonville, as soon as Frog Pond opens, its enrollment is evened out slowly with soft boundaries. Sorry, one more sentence. Westland, our numbers bump over 430 students if you do soft boundaries. So have that in consideration. Thank you, guys.
I'm gonna run a quick check. Sarah Metlin, are you going to OMSI night this evening? I had a question for you. Are you going to OMSI night this evening? Okay, let's go ahead and come on up there. Mhm.
Hi, I'm Sarah Metlin. I wasn't actually going to talk tonight because it makes me anxious, and I'm a full-time college student and haven't had a lot of time to put stuff together. But I've also been thinking about this forever and having discussions with my neighborhood and strangers. And I have 2 kids at Bolton. We live right up the hill from Bolton. My son started there 2019, so he was the last class that got to experience pre-COVID. Basically, that's at Bolton right now. I'm coming here with experience of a mother with a neurodivergent child who struggled with school refusal every morning. That started in kindergarten, and it was really tricky to work through that with the disruption of school being closed and then coming back and it all being weird and everybody being scared. Eventually, I had to take my son out just to kind of get our bearings together. And Bolton came to me, the principal, the teachers, the staff. They helped us every accommodation I needed, they gave us. That worked one-on-one with my child. They made it so that he loves school now. And he was a kid who did not want to go to school. We fought. Well, I didn't fight him. He fought me every morning. He didn't want to go. And I am forever grateful because he was very close to being a homeschool kid. And Bolton fought to help him. And they listened to me. They listened to my family and they love my kid. And that's not an experience you get from a school that is packed to the gills. That is an experience you get from a small school. Like, he would not be in public school right now if he didn't have access to such a situation. The other thing, I have a daughter. She is in 1st grade now. She loves her school. She believes she is a Bolton B. If you were to close this school, my daughter, who is in 1st grade, you'll be taking that part of her away. She will no longer be a Bolton B anymore. And I really want to see my daughter grow to be the best little bee she can be. So please vote no. Keep my school open. We need this. Our neighborhood needs this school. Thank you.
Athena Contreras.
Hi. So, I know this has not been an easy process, and I know it's not an easy decision. I know you're trying to balance a lot of different things. But I do want to make a point of what is this board's legacy going to be, and that there have been a lot of stories in Oregon City, in Portland, in a lot of different places where schools have closed very rapidly. I don't know if you've heard of Hurricane Vicky, superintendent who came in and closed, I think, 9 schools and left a little bit of chaos behind. And so I think it's really important to think about our legacy and what we're going to leave behind. And I think that this is a short-term decision that has lasting repercussions. If we close the schools with the best educational outcomes, rather than focusing on how to create more equity throughout the district, by distributing students evenly throughout the district, then what is the legacy that we're going to leave behind? What is the legacy for the neighborhoods too? The Bolton Neighborhood Association, along with other neighborhood associations, have clearly stated that this will damage our neighborhoods. And history tells the same thing, nationally and locally. If the school property is sold, could a private or charter school move in and further siphon students away from the district? If it is leased, would the same thing happen? Would we be competing? Will we basically be setting ourselves up to lose more students? If it's sold to a developer, especially with the new zoning laws that are coming, are we going to have more apartments built? Are we going to have too many students in a few years? And if we're selling off a lot of our properties, including Oppenlander and any other land banking that are the people who came before us established for us, then, and we're using it only for short term, then where's that going to leave us? The Oregon School Siting Handbook recommends buying more land to accommodate future growth, not selling to pay for our operating budget. And I think we can do it. And we also have a ton of solutions, a ton of things. If we look at those community schools can bring in grant money like crazy and offer arts and music and other things. We have a lot of opportunity. You guys can take this sheet if you'd like. This is a lot of the different things about the 300 to 400 students, functional capacity versus maximum capacity, and how that's going to affect other schools in our district. But if you guys would like. Thanks. Oh, is it possible to sign up? My daughter is requesting randomly right now to speak as well.
Yes, she can sign up and we'll have her come up.
Where do I? Yeah, thank you.
PK Runkles.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the district, it's me again. Hi. Thank you for having me. And I do want to thank the board for all the time and additional time for public comment and listening, deep listening that you've done with our communities. It really is appreciated. I know you've heard from me and my colleagues quite a lot, some of my neighbors who have been on the small school task force, and I've been thinking about this, as you have, a lot. And as you know, I have a background in assisting elected officials and school administrators. I've closed schools. I was part of the closing of Merrill-Hurst University, for example. And I felt that at the time that was the right decision to do. So I want you to know I'm not averse to closing things when they need to be closed. And when this topic first came up, my reaction was, let's see what gives our kids the best outcomes. Let's talk about that and see where we go. But I will tell you that throughout this, I've read everything about this that I can get my hands on, and I don't understand why this is the only solution we're talking about. I know that it came up through the Long Range Planning Committee, as it absolutely should have. This was the right time for them to raise this, but I don't understand why we're not looking at other solutions as well. To the community, this appears not transparent. And I feel like it's one of those things that happens because of the timing of different things. Something comes up and suddenly it appears that two things are related. When I saw the number that came out, it was 1.45 million is what the school district will save by closing a school. I don't understand how that helps us with our $15 million budget shortfall to any large extent, certainly not to the extent that's going to cause the problems that you've heard about. Now, you've heard a lot of people come up here and talk rightly about the damage that this is going to cause to their communities and how much they love their schools. I also love my school and my community. But if there were something in front of me that demonstrated why that was necessary and how it's going to lead to better outcomes for our kids, I'd be for it. But I don't see that now. What I see is two things coming up at the same time and ending up feeling like they're connected. And if it were me sitting in the seats that you're sitting in right now, I would want to go back and see what other possible alternatives there are that might have less impacts to our community than this will have. If it ends up being this one, sure, but this doesn't feel like we're at a point where we really understand what those options are. I certainly have not heard them from the district. It was a very thorough presentation at the last meeting, and I appreciated everything the superintendent had to say about the budget shortfall. It's real. We're not the only ones facing it, but we need to deal with it in a way that's smart and that leads to future success for our students. And that really would require, for me, if I were in your seat, and if I were your attorney, I would advise you to look at other options before you take this kind of step. Even with the bond process coming up, that's not a reason to make a quick decision like this. It's going to cause a lot of harm. So I appreciate you listening to me. I don't envy you. I'm glad I'm not sitting in your seats, but if I were, those were the things I'd be thinking about. So thank you for listening.
I'm gonna do a quick spot check. Mackenzie Bezio, are you going to OMSI night? Was that a yes? Are you going to OMSI night this evening? No. Okay, then I'm gonna come back to you. Okay, sorry about that. As you can tell, I'm struggling up here. Okay, Rachel Beavers.
Hi, did you guys receive my email? It was long, I'm sorry, but I want to revisit just a little of it. So 1.45 million, the cost benefit just doesn't seem like it's there. That's a lot of cost to the community, to our kids, to the school district and its ability to appear like it has everybody's interests in mind. That's a big cost for $1.45 million. So one of the things I mentioned in the email that I sent is the idea of having something be reversible, easily reversible. There are a lot of newer things that are happening based on projects that were going before the pandemic or that were voted on in the last bond measure. And I realize that these are things that the community voted for, but they also voted for these schools. So I think everything should be on the table. So the primary schools are where our kids are introduced to public education. This is when they establish their relationship to education. Our kids' success throughout their school years depends on this foundation, and this is where we want to cut. It just doesn't feel right. That's all I have.
Just in time. Ursula?
Hello. I just want to ask one question, and it's for you to please vote no option. Thank you.
John McCabe. Thank you. Greg Novak. Oh, I can hear you. I don't think we have any more people going to OMSI this evening that are speaking. Are there any others in here going to OMSI that haven't had the opportunity to speak? One? Oh, come on up. I would have gotten you earlier had I known that, so my apologies.
Hi, my name's Alex, and I'm a fifth grader in Mrs. Alaverdian's class. And also, like, I know I'll be leaving Bolton no matter what, but I have a brother named Charlie in third grade in Mrs. Clearwater's class, and if the school closes, he'll miss 2 years. And also, it can affect me because I've like there's this teacher that I'm really like best friends with. Her name is Mrs. Maxwell, and he might be in our class if the school doesn't close. So I'd like to come to his, but also, I feel like so many people said that it might be like we could learn more easy. The teachers can actually have more time to give for each of us to have more time. So don't need, and also we really like to go to Bolton, like we like the community meetings, the celebrations, the class, like the time we have with our classes, and also we also thank you for listening to me. Bye.
See you later. Have a good time at OMSI. Is there any other? I'll go back. Yeah, I'll go back. I think that's it. No more OMSIs? All right. John McCabe?
John McCabe, Westland, Oregon. I'm not sure if all of you received my email. Was emailed out late today. Our problem is not the small schools. Our problem is budget, I'll agree. And you have the high school, like 3.8% of our wages that we pay is for the athletic department only. We pay over $3.3 million. A lot of other school districts don't even do that. So it's a good thing we win state championships because we pay good money to get them. So if we're going to save money, we have to start cutting. The other part was wages for the high schools increased by $5 million last year. Not all of it, but a lot of it was Riverside. And it has very few students. It is a small school, the smallest small school. It should be closed. Now, they say there might be other options, but the other part of it is if you go away from flow analytics and look at the numbers that I sent to you of actual enrollments, the high school enrollments next year will drop by 100 students. Anybody that's in the district can go back to the original high school. And Riverside, when the demand ever comes, and it may never come in the future because of a ruling that was made by LCDC on Friday, this area of West Linn might not develop for 20 to 30 years. Yet, Athey Creek at Dollar Street was built that it was going to happen today. It's not happening for 20 to 30 years. We have to start looking at only building what we need, not for a future that might not happen. Or if it does happen, we won't have enough money if there's a massive earthquake because we're out of GeoBond funds. Nobody's looking at this. Okay, I'm looking at it. And then the other part that some people have brought up is money was borrowed in 2020 from the land bank. It was defaulted on last year. There was only supposed to be accelerated payments, not delayed payments. Technically, you guys could have your funds frozen by Oregon Department of Education because it's unclear why you're not following your own resolutions. Nobody on there voted for the original resolution, but it needs to be addressed. And therefore, when you go out and say, sell Oppenlander, we're just going to use it for schools. No, you can't. You have to come up with how you're going to pay it back. And based on current track record, there is no intention. There is another part of the budget that is hard to describe because I have no idea who the students are, but we spend more in this area than we do on all the middle school teachers. And it's, to my knowledge, it's for very few students. It needs to be looked at.
Greg Novak.
Good evening. First, I'm here primarily to talk about the Oppenlander field, but I do want to say the comments that came in around the small school closure being evaluated. I've been here 21 years. Both of my kids were born and raised in this community. Started at Merrillhurst Early Childhood, went to Trillium, went to Rosemont Middle School, and then West Linn High School. And I can say the only 2 times my kids were upset and distraught over their school experience was when they had a teacher die from cancer and they had a teacher leave the school they were going to. And some of the people here talking about their communities and the schools, I get it. I mean, if our kids are engaged and they're happy and they're comfortable, they're going to thrive in every sense of the word. And if I understand things correctly, we're talking about a savings of roughly $1.5 million. And I presume there's, from what I've heard, maybe 1,000 kids at those 3 schools. That's $1,500 a kid. So we really should be asking ourselves, what's the price for the continuity of these communities and the kids' experience versus the cost savings potential if that number is real, right? As I said, I'm here to talk about Oppenlander. I've lived right in the general area for 21 years. The last 7 years, my property actually shares a property line with the field. So I literally have direct line of sight onto that field. Second, when my kids were younger, I coached my son's soccer team. And as a coach, had to find practice facilities. This was 7, 8, 9 years ago. I can tell you at that time, one of the hardest things to do was to get practice times in fields to have their practices on. And I often had, it was a lottery, and we'd sometimes practice into the dark because that's the only alternative we had. I can also say that when I moved here, the 4-way intersection at Salamo and Rosemont was a stop sign, and there wasn't development on any corner except Rosemont Middle School within a slingshot. And now it's all homes, which is part of the world. We got progress. But if we're going to continue to build in Rosemont or in West Linn, we're going to continue to mandate 10,000 square foot lots, we have got to hold on to some place for people to go and play. Because I can tell you that every morning I watch a string of people walk out their dogs, their kids, their Frisbees, they stream onto that park because that is the land they have to go recreate on. And all summer long, I listen to families cheering for their kids in the soccer games and the baseball games. That is a center of activity. That is a place where the citizens of West Linn go to relax and get out and stretch their legs. We have to hold on to that. When I first moved here, My wife and I were looking at properties all over the Portland metro area, all the way out west. And when we told them what we wanted great schools, we wanted moderate traffic, we wanted a safe environment for our kids and ourselves. The realtor we had, who had been a realtor for 30 years and was a Portland native, said without hesitation, well, we're in the wrong place. We were out in like Parrot Mountain stuff. She says, you want to be in Westland or Lake Oswego? And we've been very happy here, but I will say, I live on Rosemont. The traffic has more than doubled in the 8 years I've lived on that road. We need to think about the quality of life and balancing the budget structurally through property taxes, not by one-time fixes. This is an affluent community. They do support the schools. We support bond issues. We support our tax base. That's the way to go. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Please don't clap. Please don't clap, or I'll shut down public comment. I'm not joking. Thank you. Christy Lance.
Good evening, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight. I really do appreciate it. As we approach this critical vote, I want to take a moment to reflect not on where we are, but where we could have been and where we can still go. Imagine a process that didn't force us into a corner with false choices, but one that empowered us to work together as a community to address challenges with creativity and collaboration. Imagine if instead of fear, we led with courage, seeing this moment not as a crisis to be survived, but as an opportunity to build something stronger for our students and for the future of this district. The district has presented us with a false dichotomy that we must choose between cutting teachers and closing schools. But I know this isn't true. There are so many creative solutions if we are willing to think outside of the box, roll up our sleeves, and put students first. Closing schools isn't an act of practical problem solving. It's a retreat. And it's one that will leave lasting scars on our community for years to come. I came across a quote during my research in a past long-range planning document, and it feels incredibly relevant tonight. Never make a permanent decision based on a temporary storm, no matter how raging the billows are today. Remind yourself, this too shall pass. The challenges that we face today, whether it's declining enrollment, budget pressures, or a temporary storm of uncertainty, will pass. But the decisions you make tonight will leave a legacy. Will it be one of trust, vision, and bold leadership, or will it be one of fear and short-term thinking? This is not about any one school or any one moment. It's about what this district can be with leadership that inspires and builds trust, leadership that sees beyond the numbers and remembers that the heart of this district is its students, its teachers, and its communities. I urge you tonight to not let fear be your guide. Take the harder path, the one that demands collaboration, creativity, and courage, and show our students that even in difficult times, we rise to the occasion, we innovate, and we persevere. That's the story they deserve to be a part of, and that's the leadership that they need to see. Thank you.
Mackenzie, looks like it's Bazio.
Hi. Whoop. So the first time I heard about Bolton closing was when I was in my neighborhood, and there were these little girls selling something like in the park on the sidewalk, and they had this little sign. I couldn't even read it. I came up and it said "Save Bolton," and I said, "What are you saving money for? What are you, going to use the money for?" And they were like, "Duh, to save Bolton." So. And, obviously that was heartbreaking to me because I went to Bolton a long time ago when I was a kid. And I just always felt like it was a really beautiful community and kind of a really, I don't know, like magical place for all the kids that were there. Like it just feels like kind of like home, you know, like when you walk into that building, it's like, I don't know, it just kind of does something. It brings back those memories of like, sorry, of like my teacher, Kelly Jones, who worked there for a long time. And I used to call her Jones. Like I would just yell at her, "Hey Jones, I have a question." Um, anyway, and like the principal, Holly Rubin, uh, Holly Rubin, and she like knew all the students' names because it was like, you know, such a small school that you just kind of know everybody. And it was just a community. Um, and I think it's important for kids to have that environment where they feel like they're a part of a community, I guess. So I think we should say Bolton because it matters to the teachers and it matters a lot to the kids and it matters to me. Thank you.
I'm not even going to try to say this last name. So I'm just going to say Taylor.
I knew that was me. Hi there. I'm sorry, I'm fighting some kind of illness too. Excuse the really sexy voice. I'm Taylor, Marta van Helkemelich. In the spirit of keeping decorum, I ask that everyone behind me calmly raise your hand if you think the small schools should be left open. I want to do that as a visual for you guys, because I think all those hands being raised means that we all think that the board can work with administration to creatively solve the budget issues in a way that does not involve closing schools. It means we have faith in you.
Will you pause time?
Did you need a minute? Okay. So all the hands, I don't know if we need to turn house lights on so you can see, but I think you guys can see all these hands being raised. It's so important. Basically, every person who's raised their hand here tonight, we want you to represent what we want, essentially. And we definitely believe that there are other solutions outside the 3 that were proposed. I don't know if everyone here remembers, but there were 3 solutions proposed at, was it last meeting or meeting before that? One was close all the schools. Okay, no, obviously that doesn't work. Close 2 schools or close 1 school. Why were there only 3 options? We really can't wrap our head around why only 3. And we hope as a board that you guys can sit down and go, wait, what's beyond those 3 options? What else can we do? We trust that you can do this, and we appreciate you seeing everyone here's hand being raised in support of keeping all of the schools open. Thank you so much.
We're at the hour mark. And we've only got 2 more speakers left. So is the board okay with hearing out the last 2 speakers? No. What's the question?
I think technically I think what our board secretary was asking is we need to extend time, but I think we don't think we need to formally do that because we have so few.
Right, right.
Or
So-
is that what you were asking? Okay.
Right, there's only 2 left, so.
Yeah.
So you guys are all good with hearing out the last 2, I would assume. Good, good. Megan, can I get a good?
Oh, yes. Good.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you. So we have Zareth? Did I say that right? Zareth? How about this? Z? All right. Dr. Z, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Just real quickly, I want to say, most importantly to me is that over the past week, I got to meet with many of you in person. I've been very impressed. I truly believe that this comes from people who are dedicated and want to make the right decision for our community. I don't know how the decision will go. I'm not here to try to influence it in one direction or another, but the job of this board is hard and it has a lot of constraints. And I appreciate all of you for all the time you put in. I think sometimes that gets lost. I do feel there were some flaws in the process that we should debrief as a community and district after tonight. And I have felt the entire time, I don't know what the community can do that might meaningfully support the district, but I would like to learn more about that and see if there's a way that we can really do that and feel like we're true partners in this. And I'm not saying that we're not, but you can see that's not unanimous in that feeling. So most importantly, thank you all for the time you put into this. Obviously, I want it to go one way, but a lot of people want it to go one way. So thanks again.
Last but not least, Shoba Eason.
I will keep an eye on the clock. I am short. Gonna move it towards me. Is that loud enough? Okay, perfect. So parents make decisions based upon the information available. The robustness of the curriculum, I'll be honest, has diminished consistently over the past 4 years. As a Catholic, I am seriously considering moving my 3rd grader, who has been assessed to be gifted and talented, and my 3-year-old, who's going to preschool, to the Catholic education system. That is not a decision that I take lightly. We moved here from Texas. I intentionally picked West Linn for the education. The saving grace for us and what we have stayed is we've seen a loss of languages. We've seen the loss of our librarian. It's something my son truly loved, was holding the librarian's hand, and he would come home and tell me about this experience. So for me, education is important, but creating a safe environment that kids can grow and feel comfortable. So despite the budget cuts taking away core curriculum such as the languages, arts, librarian, the saving grace has been the small school atmosphere has worked because he is gifted and talented, which means that the teachers have to work harder to create an individualized plan since there isn't a separate curriculum for them. And that's one of the advantages of the small school, that it's been able to weather the storm of the budget cuts, but still provide a quality education for our children. My concern comes down to the population increases. When we close the school, naturally, other schools have to absorb it. And the great teachers that we have over 20 years of experience. I get worried about attrition with the closure of schools impacting, creating stress and workloads for those teachers. How are they going to be able to support kids of varying learning needs, right? Because now you're going to increase their census. So it's something that I ask you to consider is, although I respect the budget cuts and I manage a business and I understand how it is. I manage $1 billion business. I understand it, right? I get that it's tough, but there's also dire consequences to making those cuts, and what I think there's a responsible way to approach this. And so I ask that when you consider your decision to think about the non-tangible effects that it could have on this, on these kids for the long term. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
That concludes public comment. And now we'll move into board business, which is some time for us as a board to deliberate the topics before us. And so before we get into that, this will require board action, which is why everyone is sitting in this room, or most of the people are sitting in this room, is to hear the decision that sits before us that will have an impact on our community, regardless of the decision it's a no-win decision either way. Either schools are getting closed, teachers are losing jobs. It's unfortunate that those are the choices that we have been given. And I guess just as a community member myself here for more than 2+ decades, I hope that our state makes a commitment to education at some point. It's getting ridiculous. So, but the decision before us tonight is basically to address questions from two main groups. One group being the long range committee, planning committee, where the long range plan was tasked with, and one of the questions that they came up with: are we planning for all 16 schools at a capital bond summit and capital bond program? And with declining enrollment and budget challenges, does the board still want us to go forward to the public with renovation/stewardship plans for all 16 schools, right? So that's a question that they still are asking because of the decision that sits before us today, with the potential of some schools possibly being closed. That disrupts the work that they were originally tasked to do before we knew we had a budget shortfall of 15 million. So that is one decision before us and one group that has questions. The second is for the superintendent, the CFO, and the budget committee. And those questions stem around budget challenges, given what we know now, which we didn't have these figures in July or August. The governor's proposed budget only came out in December of 2024, which talked about PERS rate increases, which were issued in October of 2024. And now we're looking at a $15 million reduction for next school year, having all the options for mitigation, the extent of the reductions. We're going to have to explore all of those. So they have questions around that. Which should we consider? And there's a few different things. At the district level, we're looking at about 7.4 million in reductions. At the school level, 7.54 million in reduction. Those together total the 15 million. If consolidating a school, meaning get rid of a school, that would equate to about 1.45 million based on the figures that have been presented to us. That number, if a school were to be closed, would be a direct savings to the school level, not the district level, but to the school level portion of the budget, which I mentioned. And we know from our current enrollment and so far with future enrollment projections that over the next 10 years, we have space in 5 of our primary buildings in West Linn to accommodate the children from about 6 schools. So if the board wishes to consolidate or close a school with a savings of 14.5 million over 10 years, we have the capacity to do that. So those are some of the things before us for the superintendent, CFO, and budget committee. So those are the things that we'll be addressing tonight in our discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ludwig. Do you have anything to add?
First of all, I just wanted to thank the community for being here, for parents being here. And I think, over the last 5 months, we've had a very engaged community that has shown up to forums, that has delved into the research, looked at figures, engaged with board members, with district staff, sent us emails, had conversations. And I just appreciate our community for caring about their schools, for speaking so highly of their teachers, for loving their communities. It's the way we want it. This is an incredible school district. It's why we came. Those of us sitting here, it's why we stay. And we understand how heavy this has been in terms of conversation on the heart of our community. So I want to thank all those who came tonight, and we know there are many people watching and others who are thinking about this important decision tonight. I want to thank the board for engaging so deeply. You went home 2 weeks ago after a presentation with a lot of information, and you've reached out with questions and clarifications. And our role tonight is to do the best that we can to continue to provide whatever guidance you need in terms of information or answer questions. You got a very thorough presentation, as thorough as we could give it. We were also very sensitive to just giving you information and not leaning in and being persuasive, but allowing you to make up your minds and your decision, listening to the community. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Taylor and Vice Chair Wyatt and the board to begin your discussion. And we are here to answer any questions that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. During this deliberation, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start from the left, and I'll start with you, Director Shoemaker, with questions, concerns, words that you might want to open with, and things for us to consider, or questions for Pat, Dr. Ludwig. And this will be a time that we get to all have some input and reflect in front of you all, which is very rare. We don't get to do this, so I'm looking forward to what each director has to say. So, Director Shoemaker, floor is yours.
Thanks. And I want to say also that I look forward to this discussion because, as people know, we don't get this opportunity until we do. And while we may occasionally run into each other and say, how's it going kind of thing, we're pretty conscious of, even in twos, to not really talk about stuff much. A couple of things I guess I'd say as we get started. I think I'm on record as saying that I would not consolidate a school for money reasons only. I might feel differently if I was convinced the amount of money was much, much bigger, and I'm not sneezing at 1.45. I have some questions about that number. It's relatively easy. I mean, no offense, Pat, because I know it's a lot of work, to line item areas that will not be costs going forward, right? And that's how you can get to that number. What's more challenging, I think, according to the research, is anticipating the extra costs that would come from moving 300 kids to other schools, costs that are frankly hard to predict. So, I use that, I think of that 1.45 as a number I'm not fully confident in. But at the same, I guess what I'm saying is, as I say that I would not do it for money alone, I would have to believe that this was also better in another sense, right? And so I appreciate the memo as part of the long-range planning group, as a liaison to that group. I appreciated the memo we got, I want to say August, when we were first asking, the long-range planning committee first asked some questions about that. There was a memo that I think it's in the big book too, one of the later tabs, that talks about some of the advantages to having schools that are more in the range of 400. And I think what we've heard a lot from the community is some question of whether or not that makes sense to them, whether schools of 400 or more, which is what we'd be doing if we were to consolidate even one school. We'd be moving the average school to 430 is the number I've been hearing. And so I'd have to feel like that really was, I think, better for our students. I spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to have a fiduciary duty lately. I know there are people for whom this question had an immediate answer, and I don't have the luxury, we don't have the luxury of immediately taking a question like this and say, nope, here's the answer, because we have a duty to everyone in our school district and what's best for all of our students. So that makes it, I think, for me, much more challenging than listening to people who love their school so darn much. What else did I want to, I'll shut up here in a second. I think I am also someone who is thinking about the impact of boundary changes as we talk about this work. The average school on the west, I hate to say the West Linn side because it feels like I'm pitting two sides of the district against each other, which frankly is no better than pitting schools against each other. But on the West Linn side, the average school would be in the 350, 360 range, I think, if we were able to have a more even boundary. And as soon as Frog Pond opens, we're going to be at a pretty close to that number on the Wilsonville side. So I'm wondering about that. When we look at the expected extra cost per student at Bolton, that being a higher number, I think that only makes sense because they're not taking any advantage of economies of scale. So I wonder about boundary changes as a possibility. I'd love for that to be part of our discussion. I'll just stop at that for now and let Director Sloop take over.
So with the process that we've had, I appreciate the information that we received in this binder. I felt it would have been helpful to have received it earlier. And one of the things that, I would like to go with, rather saying that we have a budget issue or is the school too small, approach it with, let's come up with some solutions to address that and include closing a school, but not making that the focus. Bolton has 12% dwellings of the entire district in the West Linn part. And I really do want to consider redrawing the boundaries so that it's a more balanced enrollment. I believe that's also increases our equitable outcomes. And they're going to have to be redrawn if a school's closed anyway, like sending Sunset all the way down to Athey Creek. So I would like to have that as a possible solution that we can discuss. And can I ask a question that I asked earlier? As far as cost per student, if you remove the SPED, the special education, what would that be per student? Because of the higher cost disabilities in some of the smaller schools. Now, is there a preparation? I mean, are you able to find any numbers?
Do you want to address it now, or do you want to wait and then you can address it, or do you want to just address it now because you have it? I want to be careful that,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah, so or they can write it down and address it collectively.
We're writing down, if you feel you want to hear an opening remark from each board member and then engage
I
in
think so.
questions, we can do that.
I think so, because that way you can just address them all at once and we're not jumping around. So, Director Vidal, are you done yet? No, if not, I'm coming back to you, or you can keep going.
I'll hold off. We can keep going.
Are you sure? I'm not ready to go from you. I
No,
just.
that's okay.
Okay. Director Vidal?
Thanks so much. I'm sure everyone can hear. Wait, am I?
They
Yeah,
can hear
okay. They can hear me without the mic. Today, I just wanted to start off by thanking the community for their engagement. You know, I'm a school board member because I really want to represent the community. And so we've received, or I'm going to speak for myself right now. I've received over 100 emails related to this topic. And I am not exaggerating when 98% of those emails did not want us to close small schools. I wanted to thank the 163 people who came out to Bolton and Stafford and Cedar Oak when we had meetings there to hear your responses, and the 47 speakers that spoke to us. And that's separate from our traditional board meetings.
Today, when we have this conversation with each other, which I'm so glad we're having, like, I agree with Director Shoemaker. This is going to be, I think, very illuminating for everyone. I'm going to really focus on community, process, and alternative solutions. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Chair Wyatt?
I think what I've been reflecting on has been, I think what has made this such a tough issue has been that it's really balancing facts versus feelings. And often with the choices that we are faced with as a board, and often I think in making choices related to public education, facts and feelings often are intermingled, because often what is best for our educational outcomes, the facts and feelings are often the same. And as sometimes when we think about budget and we think about concepts like community and sense of place and belonging, sometimes those don't intermingle. And so the conversations that we've had a chance to have with all of you have been wonderful to hear about the sense of place and these feelings of community that have been created in all of our schools. And so I just want to thank everyone for being so open and sharing how meaningful schools are. It's also been really interesting because it's been a reminder that you can find facts for almost anything on the internet. And for every fact that we find about the impact of small schools, we can find facts about the impact of small class sizes. And so when we think about what it means to close a school, but then keep class sizes smaller, those are both undeniable facts. And so looking at all of our data in front of us, those are all things that are worthy to weigh and consider. And same thing as it relates to, the power of having teachers that know every kid. And as that relates to, if that's in a classroom where the class size is smaller versus in a school building where the school size is smaller. And so these are all of the things that I've been thinking about. I'm also really attuned to what we've been dealing with over the 3 years I've been on the board so far, and then the 2 years I was on the budget committee prior to that. And that's what I really perceive to be this chipping away at our classroom experience due to our funding scenario. We've taken away, I think as one speaker said, we've taken away world languages, taken away our teacher librarians through our budget process. And I hate the idea of continuing to chip away piece by piece, every budget cycle. And so I think as we think about the finances and that aspect of it, each year, if we take away piece by piece, what does that mean for our educational outcomes for our kids? So that's the other piece I've been thinking about. And then lastly, I think similar as Director Vidal, as we think about process, there definitely have been pieces of this process, as I've talked about with many of you, that maybe, in hindsight, we could have done differently. But I'm really worried about who we haven't heard from as we think about solutions that affect every single student in our district, because we haven't heard from parents in every other primary school that would be affected with, any solution that affects class sizes district-wide. And we've heard very little from parents in Wilsonville. And all of our budget solutions right now have an impact on Wilsonville class sizes. So have just been thinking about that. And tonight was the first we heard from a Sunset PTO about boundary changes there. So I'm just trying to be mindful too of the fact that what happens with our 3 small schools does reverberate across the district. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about, and really looking forward to continuing these deliberations. So thank you.
All right. I don't have a comment, but water in a, you good? All right. Just to make sure. All right. I'm gonna make sure that we come back to, I know there's more questions on this side and probably on this side too. I don't have any comments or questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it down to you all to address some of the things that you've heard, and I'll give the floor over to you.
Thank you. We've given a lot of information to you, about what it means to adjust boundaries, and you've got some scenarios that were sent to you if there was that sense. So I'll just pause on that one to see if you want to come back to having that as a discussion question, whether it's connected to finances or not. We can kind of move in that direction, but just a couple quick ones maybe to address. We know in our presentation, it was the first time, I think, that we formally began to outline what would it mean in terms of anything to middle school if there was a consolidation, and that came up tonight. And Director Sloop mentioned it. Right now, we have 3 primary schools in West Linn going to 1 middle school and 3 to another. And as we presented scenarios to you, in the spirit of you kind of looking at what would happen if there was a consolidation of 1 school, it would be a 3 and a 2. And it just, throws off that evenness that we kind of have right now in terms of 3 schools to each middle school. And so in just some early examinations of that, there's a sense of if there's going to be 3 and 2, which school right now has more capacity, and that's Athey Creek, and we know that. As we bring enrollment down at Rosemont and the shifting then over to Athey Creek. And that led to Sunset being that school that could move in either of those scenarios to primary students going to Athey Creek for middle school. Even after we presented that, we talked more about it as a group and said, we have at times in our district given communities a choice. And perhaps that was the better solution to maybe present to the board would have been Sunset would be one of those schools that could choose between Rosemont and Athey. So then you would actually have 2.5, so to speak, because certainly there is that walking distance part of Sunset to Rosemont the families would probably apply for a transfer anyway, and they would get it, and their children would just continue to walk to Rosemont. And then there is some parts of Sunset that are a little further away with busing that maybe would find themselves interested in Athey Creek as they kind of acclimate more into maybe that part of the neighborhood. So just to let you know, that's not firm, but it was something that we felt we had to put in front of you as you began to think about, there's primary, but have we thought about the impact on middle school? And it does change that configuration. So it's not permanent or set what would happen with Sunset. And even as we talked, we said we can imagine many families applying for a transfer to stay at Rosemont, and we would, very likely grant it anyway. So it almost would become a school that would have a choice between which middle school. So I just wanted to address that. There was a question then from Director Sloop also about special education students. And that's not always a fixed cohort. 5th graders leave, kindergartners come in new. We're always evaluating to see who might qualify for special education services. And then there are different kinds of special education services. So it's very hard to put a dollar figure on that cost. There is a weighted component, of course, that we get from the state, regardless of the type of special education identification. So that's already factored in the weighting of students, but in terms of type of disability, would be very hard to kind of look at who's current, who would be next year. But I can turn it over to Dr. Pryor to maybe address a little bit more.
Yeah, one way we might think about that is if you can refer to page 34 of the summary that we provided a couple weeks ago. As Dr. Ludd was saying, due to shifting school populations and a pretty wide variance in the cost of individual staff members, depending upon when they were hired and their qualifications, it's hard to provide a real-time, cost per student. But one way we could look at it is looking at how we staff each school and comparing that to the number of students into a school. And so this table, there are some things that are fixed. For example, historically, we've had the same FTE for a teacher librarian at every school, regardless of school size. They all have a full-time principal. They've all historically had a full-time instructional coordinator, until last year when we made a different decision for one of our schools. But this chart also shows some of the variable staffing, for example, the number of teachers based on the number of students who attend there, the number of learning specialists based on the number of students who have IEPs, and the level of care that those students need. That's studied carefully every summer. So what this table tries to do is show you a combination of the fixed staffing and the variable staffing for each school, which does change from year to year. So this is just an annual table, and it compiles a ratio of all those staff to students. And so you could, in your head, pick a number of what does it cost to pay an average staff member and multiply it, by the staff and divide by the number of students. But the ratio of students to staff would be another way of getting at the same thing. So that might be one way, Director Sloop, of thinking about that question that you raised.
So I think that addressed some of the tangential questions. And then I think what several of you brought up is interest in looking at redrawing of boundaries. So I think we'll just turn it back to if you want to have a discussion about that amongst yourselves, and then let us know if there's any information that you need from us for that discussion.
Yep, no worries. So I'm going to come down to the left and start with you, Director Shoemaker. Any questions about that? Concerns?
I don't know that I have questions and concerns. I guess I want to know more about what it would look like if we tried to boundary so that we were closer to 350 per school.
Yeah, so did you need that from me or to each other first? Okay. So we were able to send each of you a table that showed, mathematically, we could certainly move children. And to get something around 350 to 360 at each school. And that would involve, moving some children from Sunset to Bolton, some children from Trillium Creek to Cedar Oak Park, another large group of children from Trillium Creek to Bolton, and then some children from Willamette to Stafford. So like 38 children from Willamette to Stafford, 39 children from Sunset to Bolton, 20 children from Trillium Creek to Cedar Oak Park, and 110 children from Trillium Creek to Bolton. So, if we provided that type of a plan and said it's really important to our board that we have more even schools, and this is where the children reside, and this is how they are presented as primary children right now, or at least for the next 5-6 years. We don't know when they move on to middle school who's going to come in. We might have to readjust again when that next cohort group comes in of K-5, see where they reside, where they're going to school, and how many families who still live in those neighborhoods have elementary children. But if that's a value of the board and a direction to do that, we could make that announcement to the community with that plan. We do have a practice in the district where families can request to transfer, and that would still be in effect. And so, the families of those 39 children at Sunset could request to stay and not move. We have in the past historically approved transfers if there's space where the families are requesting. And because we have space at all of our schools, where they're going or where they're staying, we would say yes to a family being able to stay at their current school. So while we could have this plan and present it to the community, I'm not sure that we would have all the families move according to the plan. I can imagine that they would ask to stay at their current school, and if we have space available, that we would allow that. It would be if the board said, do not approve any transfers, that we would have to have that type of a direction, because currently and historically, we have approved all in-district transfers as long as there's space available. So I'll just pause there and see what questions you have, but you should have that chart available for you to take a look at, and any questions you have about whether that's possible, yes. Whether it would happen, I don't know. Because I could imagine community members having an opinion about whether they want to move or not.
Go ahead. Mic on.
So in one of the scenarios, as you were talking about redrawing the boundaries, if a school closes, is that still going, is the soft choice boundary going to apply, and they can still ask to do an inter-district transfer to the school that they don't want to get moved to?
Yes, and we mentioned that in the presentation, that if there was a school that did consolidate or close, and then we said, these are the two choices, these are the two areas that we're going to redraw the boundaries. If a family said we prefer actually somewhere else and there's space at that school, which we do have, then we would approve that transfer. So we did mention that also in the presentation, that right now there is capacity at all of our schools. And so if for a family, choice is important when there are some difficult things that are happening, we would work incredibly hard to help a family get to where they prefer to be in the next year, if there was a closure of a school.
I have a question. I've received emails from people whose kids come here from, I've received emails from community members who live outside of our community, but their kids come in from neighboring cities. And I've, and they've asked, hey, whatever decision you're going to make, if it's going to happen, what's going to happen with my kid if he's or she is coming from a neighboring community. And then we've heard and have received emails from our residents in this community who said that if you're going to consolidate schools and we're going to have upwards of 28 kids in a class potentially, why are we still allowing neighboring kids to come in and increase our class sizes? So in the event a school were to happen to be closed and consolidation happened, would we as a district be considering telling all of the neighboring communities that your kids can no longer come to school here to bring our class sizes down? Has that been something that's been considered?
So your first question was, you've got community members who are outside the district wondering what would happen if the school they're attending that they did an inter-district transfer closed.
Correct.
For them, because they don't reside in the neighborhood of the school that was closed, they're already transferring in, we would ask them, we would let them know where the new boundary is, where their classmates might be going of the other two schools. And then they would need to let us know where their request is for their transfer, because they don't reside in that neighborhood. So that would be the process for that. In terms of, can we revoke a transfer that's already been provided by statute? Once a family has been accepted as a transfer, they are considered then a resident and they stay through graduation.
Okay. Thank you. Director Vidal, anything?
Sure. I have a question. that I had sent in, and it pertains to a table the Small Schools Task Force provided to us regarding the percentage of housing units by attendance area. So the percentage of units per attendance area varies, with Bolton at the low end at 12%. And this means that 12% of the number of dwellings in the entire district are in the Bolton boundary, while at the high end is Williamette. The median percentage, Dan, I looked this definition up, so proud of me. The median, the median percentage is 16.5%. If you look at every single primary school, the median would be 16.5%, which is below the average, which is 17.6%. This would mean that in order for Bolton to reach that 16.5%, it would need 62 additional units developed. And I'm curious as to why the Bolton boundary was drawn significantly smaller compared to the other attendance areas.
Sure, I can talk about that, and then I think Pat may have some opinions about housing. When Bolton reopened, and I think you've got the history of the evolution. It actually first opened as a preschool center. And so it started with a lot of preschools. And the sense was that as we launched a vision back at that time, and the principal who opened Bolton was Dr. Margaret Allen, that the school district could have a preschool center or hub, and then students from there would go to their neighborhood school. Bolton did not have a boundary. It was a choice for a preschool. As preschool parents became, of course, attached to Bolton, they wanted to stay for kindergarten. And it became pretty clear that the staff was very committed, and the district wanted to accommodate those requests. And at that time, we were growing in West Linn, and Trillium Creek had not been built yet. It was scheduled. It was in the long plan for a capital bond coming up. And so Bolton switched to being an option school and then accommodated kindergarten, first, second. And then at some point, it became clear that it needed a boundary. And because it had at that time quite a number of preschools still in its school, the rest of the schools did not have preschools at that time when Bolton created its boundary. I think there were even about 5 or 6 or 7 preschool classes. There were parenting classes, mom and me classes. And so the remaining classrooms would have to accommodate kindergarten through 5th. So keeping preschool there and then accommodating for K-5 is what created that initial boundary. How much room did Bolton have for K-5, considering it also held all of the preschools in the district? And at that time, we didn't know how many more preschools we would be adding at Bolton. So that's maybe part A to your question historically. And then, of course, when we opened Trillium, there was the opportunity to think about boundaries again, particularly for Sunset and other areas around that. There was a lot of conversation, families may remember who have been here a while, around walking boundaries and walking to school and prioritizing that for schools as much as possible. We also opened Trillium with a dual language program to accommodate there. And so it needed to have space not only for students from across the district, across West Linn, who didn't reside, but were coming for that program. And the board at that time also said that siblings of dual language students would also be welcome, even if they weren't in the program. So we had to think about the size of Trillium to accommodate the dual language program and siblings and where its boundary would be. Bolton still holding a lot of the preschools, and then, of course, thinking about the other schools. It's not a perfect science. because family dynamics don't stay the same all the time. Children grow up, they still stay in the neighborhood. Now they move to middle school and high school. And so the families, the composite of the families change within those boundaries. So there are times when we do make what we call soft adjustments if we feel that they're needed. And we've done that periodically. So I hope that describes why Bolton's boundary started the way it did and did accommodate quite a few preschools. It also has the smallest site. There's a very small, a couple small playgrounds. It doesn't have a field. Parking is limited. So we always kind of knew as well that it was a little landlocked and made it challenging in terms of its size. And so to be mindful of whether all the faculty could park there, and also if it grew larger, would students feel like they had adequate play space given its location. Do you want to add anything about? No. Okay.
All right. Do you have any questions? No? Back down here, any other?
You asking if I have any more comments?
Well,
Okay.
I just, as in the spirit of discussion, I had a point to Dan's initial question about the reboundary issue. And after Dr. Ludwig's explanation, and then just seeing those numbers, I just think that it would be disastrous at this point in time to inform the whole community that we are going to, all of their kids are going to have to go to new schools. I do think that it was an absence of leadership, probably years and years ago, to not seek the wisdom and knowledge that we've learned from families about the benefits of small schools and try to find that balance across our schools. But I just feel like at this point in time to say to 100 trillion kids, you know, tomorrow you have to go to a new school, like, it just seems like a really bad timing for that. So I don't know if that's what you were asking or suggesting as part of this, but I feel like that seems a bit much at this point. But I would, as a board, you know, perhaps we talk at a later date about how do we look bigger picture at finding that balance that we've learned about throughout this whole process.
Can I engage us in some mathematics real quickly? So my interest in trying to level out that is when I look at it's on page 22, the rather stark spending per student, right? And that Bolton spending is at 21,000. And it's about 4,000 above the average per student in the Westland, or the Westlands, or I guess all of the schools district wide. It's about 4,000 more per student average. And I think it's pretty clear that's a function of its size, right? So here's the math. If you had 230 students and you weren't spending that, instead you were saving 4,000 because you were spending at the average, that's almost $1 million, right? And you only achieve that, bringing that average down by putting more students there. Now you can also save money by consolidating and doing it that way. So I'm not saying that consolidation doesn't do that, but if we were to have average cost per student be more equal across schools, then we save nearly $1 million just doing that. Now, how do we do that? Well, we could tell students you have no choice, you have to go to a school. I'm not in favor of that. I think the choice that we've given students in the past has been fine, but we're looking a little bit long range here. I mean, after all, I think I've heard the number, 14, 15 million, if you think 10 years out. I'm thinking about how do you go out and get that change over time. In the short run, no, we would not next year get 350 students there. So we would not realize that savings right away. But part of our consideration is, I think consolidation is absolutely worth considering. if it's going to save us more than $1 million a year, year after year. I'm also thinking about a year after year savings that way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's why in my opening comments, I just worry about this concept of have we engaged the whole community versus just a smaller portion of this community. Because, I mean, again, if we start thinking about our entire district and every school, then all of a sudden this becomes a much bigger conversation. So, but thank you. I appreciate that you brought this up for us.
I think one of the things that I think about when it comes to boundaries is there's only so many areas that you can add housing in the city of West Linn or in the surrounding unincorporated Clackamas County, which is where I live. And I think as John McCabe said earlier, there's a decision that just came out. I mean, I live in the Stafford Hamlet, so I live in a community that is very anti-development. You know, I live on acreage, so I'm okay with that. But, you know, but I also know that development needs to happen. And so if you have a ruling that just said that we're not going to allow for development in Stafford, which immediately affects Stafford Elementary, which is where my children went, and then to the older Athey, which is now Riverside, and you only have development opportunities where else. So as you redraw boundaries, you can't just take a boundary and draw it, and there's no chance of development. And as wherever they do develop, right, you're gonna have to redraw them again, and you're displacing the same people over and over again, basically in the city of West Linn. So just continuing to redraw the boundary for a forecast 10 years down the road doesn't make sense. So if we were gonna do a boundary redraw, it should be drawn in a way wherever the growth is heading to encompass where new housing actually can go. I guess technically, if Oppenlander were not to be bought by the city, which I guess we'll figure that all out. And if it is bought by the city and it remains a field or whatever they decide to turn it into, that's not an opportunity for new housing. If it is not bought by the city and someone else buys it and decides to do something else with it, it may be developed, it may not be developed, we don't know. So is there some consideration for where there's actually opportunity for housing to actually start to move in this boundary thought process?
When you receive that flow analytics report and that projection for 10 years, they are considering future development. So they meet with city planners, they meet with city staff. Maybe Pat can speak more to who they're consulting. And when you look at the flow analytics report, you'll see a table in there about future development and the year projection of when it's going to happen. So, you know, today's first column or the first column of the first year of that 10-year projection looks like this year, but it does contemplate and have factored in future development, whether it's in sections of West Linn or Wilsonville. And I'll let Pat speak more to that.
My only challenge to that before
Oh.
you go, is that when you're talking about city bodies that are making decisions on where development goes, and then you get a ruling like this week, that throws their projection all the way out the window. Because now whatever they projected for the area of Stafford has just been killed.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that that was in there, but I mean, you know, it's.
Yeah, in that table, it tells you, you know, if it's within that 10 years that it's going to happen, then it's factored in that table. So for example, we had a lot of community members ask us about Vision 43. That's not factored in the table because city staff gave us feedback and said, Vision 43 is too far beyond a 10-year forecast. It's way out there. We're just starting to have those conversations. So they had no information to give flow analytics in terms of definitive or development. So that's not factored in, but those kinds of plans that are expected within those 10 years are in that table. It doesn't answer your boundary question, but it is a way of looking out and saying, if we use this table, can we see where movement is going to happen? Because flow analytics kept those same boundaries in that table. They didn't change boundaries. So they can show us what Bolton would look like in 10 years, or Cedar Oak Park, or Willamette, within the same, boundaries that we have drawn today.
Thank you.
Now, remember, Flow Analytics also gave us 3 scenarios, a high, a medium, and a low. So the one we've been using the most is the medium. And the reason for that is exactly to your point, Chair Taylor. Something could happen, and it could skew one of those predictions in terms of either one section of a planning development or one little area. And then we might be closer to the low scenario, or maybe closer to the high scenario. So that's why they gave us 3 scenarios, depending, just because of occurrences that could happen, that could change some of those plans.
Gotcha.
Pat, did you want to add anything?
You keep stealing my thunder. Mostly during the planning stage, when Flo met with local jurisdiction planners, that's the city of West Linn, city of Wilsonville, little bit, and the leaders from the city of Tualatin, Clackamas County, Washington County, and Metro. They outlined what their projected growth was, what they projected within their areas. So the city staff for the city of West Linn projected out where they believe the greatest development would occur. And while the table gives us very specific breakdown of permits that are currently being pulled and planned developments, most of the city of West Linn is infill construction. That is to meet either vacant lots or oversized lots where they will add a second unit. So it did not have the projected growth of the city of Wilsonville, but it did project some slight increase over time.
Thank you. We ponder. Anything else? We've had a couple of weeks to think about a lot of this. I was the last, I think, of all of us to read anything, because I was busy meeting with community people and listening to board meetings and whatnot before I went through all of this stuff. So I feel pretty good about where I'm at. But I want to continue the dialogue if there's anything left for us to continue to talk about. I think that no matter what we decide to do today, there's going to be a lot of, this is just step one of many, there's going to be work to do after this with possible boundaries or possible solutions. So I think this is just kind of just beginning, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ludwig or Pat, but yeah, so there's a lot of work left. But what stands before us today, and I think all of you at some point, and you, I'm going to give you guys another opportunity to kind of speak to, is we have a few different motions that are in front of us, and I'm not sure if, I just want to let everybody know kind of what those are, and the choices that might come out as a motion today. And one of those is not to consolidate any of the 3 small schools for 2025-26 school year. The second is that we consolidate a primary school, and that would take effect next year. And then the last option before us today to consider is if we would consolidate a primary school to take effect next year, and then another primary school to take effect in 2027. So those are the 3 things that are before us as a school board to think about. And Vice Chair Wyatt, anything you want to add?
I think before I mean, it is acceptable for us to, perhaps by consensus, see if we are closer to agreement before, continuing with our discussions. And so if we had consensus, that might narrow down the focus of our discussion. And so if folks were comfortable with that, we could see if there was consensus regarding where we are. I'm looking to see if folks would be open to me asking a consensus style question. And so I would be interested to know, like, based on nods or thumbs up or however you'd like to indicate, if we have consensus regarding not consolidating two schools, meaning that we might shift our discussion to talk about the possibility of just consolidating one school, so moving away from the idea of two schools. And I think the alternative would be, if I didn't see any indication in support of that, by not indicating your support of that would mean that you'd want to continue talking about consolidating more than one school. So I'm looking for consensus, meaning you want to just talk about not consolidating two schools. You want to consolidate just one. Yeah.
So your thumbs up represents that you are okay with not discussing closing two schools. Okay. Okay. Okay, I don't have any interest in discussing it, so we can just take that one out of the equation. I'll scratch it. So now that the discussion now is down to consideration for no schools or possibly consolidating one school. And so since we know that we're not going to consider consolidating two schools, we can shift that conversation now to other things or other that may have been on your mind about those two options. So,
And in the spirit of that kind of consensus narrowing down, could I ask one more consensus style question? Could we also not consider the consolidation of Cedar Oak Park School this evening, given the staff recommendation? Which would mean that Bolton and Stafford schools would be the two we would be discussing this evening?
I think I would want them to reiterate why they had that as a recommendation. Just so that the community might hear. Not everybody is up to speed on that. I mean, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for other folks.
Can I just say before that happens that I'm not in favor of doing that?
Me neither.
I'm not in favor of excluding one for the purpose of discussion. For the purpose of discussion, I'd rather include all of them.
Okay, well then you don't have to answer that question because I'm not interested either, but so that's three, so we can move on from that. See, I saved you guys some page turning. So now all schools are within the discussion. Were there any other consensus questions that you had or anyone else has? Okay. Moving on, that takes us down to a couple of different options. And I'll repeat them again. The two options before us that remain is, do we not consolidate any of the three schools that have been labeled small schools? Or we consolidate one of the three, since they are all open for discussion, to take effect in the 2025-26 school year. Are there any other?
I have a question for you as chair.
Sure.
Would you prefer that discussion happen after a motion is made, or are you still open to, for us to have deliberations generally before a motion is made?
I'm open for deliberation prior and after, but if there's no more deliberation to be had prior, I don't have anything to deliberate. So this is about the four of you at this point for me. So I'll let you know that. I'll keep asking until I'm blue in the face until you say no, but I'm pretty solid in where I'm at. Okay, so if that's the case,
I'm sorry, if what's the case?
good catch.
I think I missed that.
Okay, no worries. I said that we can have deliberation prior to a motion being made, or we can wait for a motion to be made for one or the other and see if that motion passes, and then have deliberation post the motion. So, and then I followed that up with, I'm solid. So this is about the four of you. I don't have much to deliberate, but
And the reason I was asking is that sometimes once a motion is made, it can focus the discussion on the motion itself. But if there is more general discussion to be had, now that we've kind of by consensus agreed that we're focused on consolidation of one school, sometimes that is enough. And so that's why I was asking if he had a preference as chair. But he's saying that he's open to us just having a discussion now, or if someone has a motion they'd like to put on the floor, they could.
and the reason that I don't have a preference is because the magnitude of the decision. And so I'm not going to impose my preference of anything onto you. So today you will make a decision, whether you like it or not, as will I. All right, so I guess we can move on to, do we have a motion to, I'm going to start with the first one, just go in order. Do we have a motion to,
Sorry, I'm confused. I thought what you were saying is we were going to deliberate before the motion.
oh, I did, but no one said anything. So,
I would like to deliberate.
thank you. Okay,
Thank
these
you.
mics work.
You know, sometimes I'm not sure if I
No,
should,
no
if I
worries.
should be talking or, so something I guess I'd like to hear from you all a little bit is, we've obviously heard a lot about the flow analytics report. I'm not one who really doubts their methodology. I know some people do. I tried to look more closely at it. It's very mathematical. You know, they've got multipliers and they're saying this is what we're going off. I don't doubt their data. What I'm concerned about is that we lost a lot of students in a short period of time. And that is not the same experience that, I mean, it's a similar experience that a lot of districts had now, but it's not the same experience that districts had that lost students very gradually over time, say from 1990 to 2005. Say if you're a district that lost that because maybe you had been a big growth district and then you started to slow down, right? And then you kind of dropped off, as districts do, which inevitably will happen for our district as well, that we will lose population. But because there was a fairly quick drop, I've struggled a little bit with my confidence in that leveling, staying level, and whether or not there might be some bump back. I doubt that we'll bump all the way back. And as we know, most families that, because most of those people who left stayed within our district, live still within our district. But when those families made that decision, we know that those families tend to not come back. They sometimes come back in their later years in school, but particularly at the elementary level, they tend to say, we made a decision, we're going to write it and stay with it. But because of that, my thinking has been, I don't know about that part of flow analytics. I'm just kind of curious if any of you have had similar thinking about that or what? You know, I don't get that many times. This is my first time getting asked you about that.
Yeah, I've had some, is it okay that I jump in? Yeah,
Yeah.
I was wondering, yeah.
This is what I was
So
waiting.
when we look at the numbers, we see that 891 students have left the district, which is 8.9%, right? And then when we look at a small high school like Riverside, which has about 100 and something students, we see that their leaders go out to our middle schools and they're presenting to middle schools about how great Riverside is and how wonderful the programs are. And shouldn't you come to Riverside? And I believe in Riverside. I'm saying that right now. I believe in Riverside High School. Shouldn't your student go to Riverside because of how unique we are, right? But do we see that happening at the primary school level? Do we see principals or teachers or parent groups, PTAs going to community members saying, have you been to Cedar Oak? Have you seen the amazing programs at Cedar Oak? You know, I really haven't heard those stories from the people that have been coming to speak to us. I haven't heard that in the emails. I've actually heard that there's some confusion around how we as a district inform our community about how excellent we are. Because when we look at two of these three small schools, we can see that they're the actual top performing academically, top performing in the district. And then when we look at belonging, we see that these three small schools are also doing really well in belonging. So it's really confusing to me how we have like a process for one small school, and then we don't really have a process for primary schools. So that is what I have been really thinking about a lot.
And I've been struggling with the Long Range Planning Committee's previous report, as well as flow analytics, where they were showing West Linn-Wilsonville increasing in growth up to like 13,000. My feeling is, as I'm processing through all of this, is there's a lack of thinking outside the box and focusing on how can we increase our enrollment, whether it's allowing open houses, tours, expanding our pre-K, preschool programs, through expanding the career technical training, early childhood development. We have a teacher shortage. So I'm struggling with, in this whole process with our budget, we're focusing on whether or not to close a school, and instead of looking at all of the options, and just like Megan said, you know, apparently the Mandarin Chinese program is on our website as well as Bolton. I looked, I just didn't think to look under program, but I feel that there's just a lack of communication and highlighting our school district. But then when you hear from parents, everybody says, we moved to West Linn-Wilsonville because of the schools. One of the flow analytics had the birth rate. And again, I know this can be counterfact, but a lot of parents don't like live here and then say, oh, let's have kids. You know, I hear they're great schools. People in-migrate into our district. My husband and I did the very same thing, and we were in our 30s. So I'm struggling with just the lack of not highlighting our enrollment. And as Dan said, it was a rapid drop very quickly, and not over time like Lake Oswego when they closed their schools in the early 2000s. It will correct, and even Flow Analytics has primary enrollments increasing over, I mean, not the next year, but over time. And we can highlight the uniqueness of the small schools, just like Riverside. I'm curious, how much is that per student? We didn't have any data from 22, 23, but I would say it's significant amount per student versus what the other high schools are. So that's all I have to say.
I mean, I think if we could predict if we could predict the future of that, I mean, we would predict who's going to win the Super Bowl. We would predict, we would predict a lot of things. And I think what is, so unique is even within our own district, we have, such a vast difference in what's happening in terms of growth and especially with housing. And I think this is where that interplay with, especially with housing and affordable housing is coming into play. And I mean, we look at the explosive growth and the building of homes in Wilsonville, and we don't see that happening in West Linn, and how incredibly expensive it is to move into this community with school-age kids. I think for me, some of the most compelling stories have been about families who have moved here and, wanted to be in this district. And, the fact that getting here has been really difficult. And I know that that has been part of flow analytics calculations. And it almost seems cruel to market our district and then to say we only have infill development and it's going to be prohibitively expensive. So I think those numbers, like just, on the surface seem to make sense as well, in addition to birth rates being what they are. And then not knowing what the next, 4 to 8 years hold politically as well. So I wish we knew more. But it is interesting to think about our district as a whole and then our communities and then the interplay with our local governments as well, for sure.
So I bring that up because here's why I think this is critical. I personally believe that when you get much above 90% capacity, that's a real challenge on a building. So when we say we have some capacity and we're moving students to buildings and it moves them up to 90 or above, I know the numbers say we have capacity, but that gets to be a real challenge. And if we were to do that and bump a bunch of schools up at 90 or more, and then we were wrong and we end up with 100 or 150 more students, then we're really struggling with capacity. That's why I bring that up, because for me, there's always a couple of kind of errors you can make. You could close a school when you shouldn't have, or you can not close a school when you should have. Closing one when you shouldn't have, I worry about a little more than the other type of error.
And that leads to a question that I had earlier is, how is our capacity defined? I was reading long-range planning in the previous one, and it was a square footage ratio. But then another formula is where you take the number of classrooms, and for K through 3, you multiply it by 22, 4 through 8 is 25. So where are we in these capacities? And then what is the optimal capacity? As Dan said, you don't want to be at 90%. What is that optimal? I've looked at other school districts and they figure between 70 and 80% of their capacity.
So our long-range planning committee does calculate based on square footage per student by level. It's like 37 square feet for primary. It goes up to 46.2, 47.2 for high school. But there are two different ways to calculate capacity. One is by the square footage. The other is simply a mathematical 25 students per classroom period. It's up to the principal to balance fifth grade, maybe at a little higher than kindergarten. And so the capacity is based on that. As far as how a school total capacity, should it be loaded at 70, 80, or 90% or 100%? Of course, more students makes a school fuller, but we've even had overcapacity where we've had portables. That's not fun, but a school can certainly handle it. I think we would say that we are prepared to take any school to its capacity. So I don't know if that addresses your question directly. I think that's a little subjective for all principals or teachers or parents, But from a capacity standpoint, that's the reason you have a full capacity.
And I would just, I would just add that I think everyone likes it to just look exactly perfect. Is there a classroom in a class at every classroom? Because when you have a couple empty classrooms, we get comments of, how come we have these empty classrooms? And then when there's too many, we don't have enough classrooms, but we just can't always predict and have the exact number. So there is that flex space in there. One of the places we've done that is, and I mentioned Bolton having that history of being the preschool hub. There was a time then when every primary school did then open their own preschool as Bolton became more of a K-5. And we opened preschool at every school other than the 2 dual language schools, Trillium and Lowry, which we wanted to leave space as that program grew. So factored in this capacity is each school having a preschool classroom. And that's always given us a buffer of 1 extra classroom because preschool is not mandatory. And there was times when Willamette couldn't have a preschool, but the other schools could. And now, of course, Willamette has space. So that's factored in here in terms of that 90%. So I just wanted to add that component.
I would like to add one more thing. Space utilization is a factor at high schools and middle schools, that because there are prep periods for teachers, ideally you would not want your space utilization to exceed like 85%. If you're up at 100%, that means every classroom is being used for teaching every period. And that gives no time for the teachers to have their prep period. So that may be the number that you're looking at, is the space utilization at secondary schools. But at primary, it goes right up to 100%.
I have a follow-up question on that. So I'm a little bit confused between large class sizes being negative because they affect education and taking schools to capacity. Could you talk to me about that? Because to me, it's just a little confusing. So talk to me about the difference between taking a school to capacity versus a large class size.
Yeah, so I think when we have this range of class size that we talk about with the community or with our teacher association, and we have that range that we're thinking about, smaller grades and smaller sizes in the younger grades, and then a little bit larger in the upper grades that we're willing to go. We hear from our community, I know every year annually when we ask about the budget and we do a survey, class size is the #1 priority. It comes back #1 in every survey. So there is this factor where parents are thinking about their students' experience all day long and how many students do they feel in that classroom begins to impact the access to the teacher or how many desks are in the space. And so we work really hard to keep it on the lower range. And we think about 19 to 21 in grades 1, 2, 21 to 23, maybe grades 2, 3, and then, 24, 25 in grades 4, 5. Am I getting that right, David? And so that's been the range that we've worked with, knowing that somebody might say, wait a minute, my child's in a class of 28 this year. That can happen. Twins move in, something happens in a school, and that one year they might be an anomaly. They also might say, my kindergarten happened to have 17 this year. It could be on the other end too, but we really try and work with that average. So that's what we mean by class size, and what we hear from the community as a priority, and what we work with and with our staff, and where we put our resources to keep class size lower. I think the second part was what happens to capacity in a school. That's how many classrooms are in a school and how how many of them are occupied by a class. So, we aim at about that 25, but there might be some school districts that say, we have a larger capacity, we would have a larger capacity for that same building because we're okay putting 30 students in a classroom. So you could make the capacity of a school larger on paper by saying, we're okay putting 30, 35 students in a classroom, therefore this school has more capacity. And that was, I think, your question to Pat is Director Sloop's question, what calculation did you use? So it's not only square footage, but we're also thinking about that range of how many students per classroom do we work with in terms of that experience for that student. Am I getting closer to what your question, Director Vidal? You were saying, I'm trying to think about reconciling capacity, of school and class size.
Yeah, I just noticed though, when we were in a couple of the schools, like, well, all three schools, Cedar Oak, Stafford, and Bolton, they are older schools with larger classrooms than, let's say, where my son went, Lowry Primary. So they have more square footage in their classrooms than the newer schools. So that's when we talk about square footage, they're going to have more square footage. So just, yeah, you answered my question.
Yeah, some of the older classrooms may have some of that, yeah. Could I address the comment about we're not thinking outside the box as a school district? When COVID happened and we all across Oregon experienced that decline in enrollment, I think the furthest thing from anybody's mind was that the decline would stay that way. And that's why everybody kept all their schools open, kept all their staff hired, resources in place, expecting that return. And when it didn't happen after the first year, there was a wondering of, is it because of our AB hybrid? Is it still some nervousness about return to school given the pandemic and not knowing if, how does a pandemic work? And will I still send my child back to a building with a lot of people in it? So I think it really was around that second, third year, coming out, that there was this realization, this is not coming, we're not in that uptick across Oregon, nationally, same trend, and that this may be the new enrollment norm for school districts. This is the new level, and then you compare your enrollment, from that new level. Immediately coming out, we did ask ourselves, how do we tell our story so that families, first of all, it was, how do we tell our story that we're safe, that we are thinking about protocols? We got that messaging out as much as we could in the media to families, asking families to tell other families safe to come back to school. So that was the first type of thinking outside the box. How do we get that message out? But then also reassuring families that we would continue the programs that they could see in our school district. We went ahead, Director Sloop, you mentioned our CTE pathways. It would have been very tempting to not move forward with that work at our high school, to kind of pull back with the unknown, but we wanted to continue with our CTE programming and pathways. We knew that was a draw for high school students especially. We brought back as quickly as we could around our athletics and co-curricular. I think you'll remember in the news, it was even sooner than some other school districts, was our return to those activities. We weren't able to bring preschool classes back right away because when we surveyed, we heard that families were reluctant to send their younger children so close to the pandemic. But as soon as we could, we reopened our preschools. The numbers have not been the same as they were before, but we went ahead, even when we lost financially in doing that, we went ahead and offered preschool at every school and then waited to see who would enroll. So we were aggressive with that and hired teachers, and even when classes were very small, to make that available. We went ahead and opened the Chinese dual language program. Even though COVID had happened and we had dropped 700 students, we thought maybe this is the time to gain interest, talk about our school district, be innovative, and start that program. We placed it at Bolton for a reason. First, it was a school very deeply committed with its world language program to Chinese. Several of the teachers had gone with me to China to visit our sister schools and had a very deep commitment. So it made an ideal location. But I would say, you know, when there was a lot of signs of kind of not starting something new, given where we were with enrollment, we went ahead and pushed forward with that dual language program and started the Chinese dual language program to invite families back, maybe even invite families who hadn't started in the school district. It's also open to families outside the school district. A couple years ago, I approached the district school board and said, the staff would like to request that you reopen interdistrict transfers as a way of accommodating staff who'd like to work in the district and would like to bring their children, as well as other families who are inquiring about coming to our school district. If you recall, we had closed prior to the pandemic, and then all the school districts kind of were in just a status quo period of time. But then I proposed to the board, I think it's time that we open the district and invite people to come. Now, we're not allowed to use public funds to recruit families or to advertise for families outside the district, but we can do these types of things that put us in the news and get our story out there. The other thing we did about 2 years ago is we have in our communications department, which is very small, it's a staff of 1. We actually were able to bring, through some other funds, a person working on the website as well as a videographer. So if you've seen these 2-minute videos that highlight things happening at schools and get them out there, we know that our society is much more inclined to watch a TikTok video or something short on YouTube than often read a long narrative describing programs. So our mandate to this staff member was every week, make a video about exciting things happening in our district, get it out there, get it out to the news media, get it out to our schools. People will circulate it, which they have. So I would say in the last few years, we have, with that declining enrollment, once we realized it wasn't coming back, we have explored within our financial means, what are the things that we can do to tell our story, to get it out there in the news media. We've done a lot more with Pamplin around sending them stories or asking them to come out and look at activities, which they have increased that. They have increased their education stories. And then also moving forward with programs that give us the opportunity to tell community and neighboring community, and also maybe those who hadn't thought about coming to public school, about all the programs that their children can be a part of. So I just want to share, those are things we've intentionally put forward, even when it was tempting to maybe just hunker down or just to stay status quo. We've pushed forward a lot of these programs at our high school. We've started the dual language program in Chinese. We've brought back interdistrict transfers. We have brought back preschool and worked to expand it. And then also showcasing our school district whenever we can. Is there more we can do? There's always more we can do. And hoping that families will join us in those efforts, and we'll continue to explore those and continue to advertise. So, and we're open to any suggestions the board has on ways we can think outside the box more.
Anyone else?
In the numbers that you sent us for the 2026 school year for Bolton, you had indicated that the projection is 190 to 195 students and 6 to 7 teachers. And if I compare that to page 34, so does that mean that that would bring us down to 6 to 7 classroom teachers? And then can we assume that the other licensed staff and office team would remain the same in terms of if we think about the number of adults in the building? And so, and would that take us down to one class per grade for kindergarten through 5?
Yeah, well, it's unclear at this point, but I just looked at enrollment again today. I kind of pulled the latest enrollment figures, rolled everything up, made the assumption kindergarten would be the same size this year or next year as it is this year, just as a starting point. And then looked at, how could we staff Bolton in those numbers, meeting the staffing scenarios which were proposed in the budget conversation last board meeting. And it does roughly equal, if, for example, if dual language stays there, about 5 classroom teachers and of non-dual language with another 2 dual language teachers, splitting the load of the 4 classes, each taking 1 class for half the day. So a total of 7 teachers. I'm still scratching my head a little bit, but I know we've got some time to be creative to think about how we organize that number of teachers into class sizes that feel sustainable. Like that would mean, for example, just in the best scenario I can figure out at this point would be, a mixed age K1 with 28 students in it. Probably a mixed age 2-3 because you've got 21 second graders and 29 second graders. So looking at 26-ish, 25, 26. But then 4th and 5th grade is tricky because this year we had a 5th grade of 53. That is the largest class, the largest grade. They'll move on to middle school. And then you end up with a 4th grade of 33 and a 5th grade of 33. And so, I'm very uncomfortable with class sizes of 33. If you add 1 staff member to bring it up to 5 non-dual language teachers, then you bring that down to 22, which is another unsustainable level. And so, we've got time to plan, and we're always trying to be strategic, and we've been really creative, but it's a really good representation of the challenge ahead of us when the numbers fluctuate either too high or too low with the addition or subtraction of 1 staff member. So I want to be really clear, that's nothing but just trying to figure it out with those numbers. We're not proposing staffing at this time. We're just trying to plan ahead. Mm-hmm.
Anything else on anyone's heart, mind? Okay. Anything from Dr. Ludwig? Anything remaining for you? No? Pat? Huh? Oh, I'll wait.
So we're talking about a Bolton primary that's 200 and possibly even less. And I just want to go on record as saying that's too small, right? That's why I've been talking about boundaries. That's too small for exactly the reasons you're talking about. I mean, I think that's worth saying out loud. I think that's too small. And we have tough choices to make, but I do want to ask one budget. Well, it's sort of a 2-part budget question. So Dr. Ludwig, if you could, education budget is always a moving target. It's always challenging. The state starts floating numbers. We obviously have to have a budget that you're going to present in May. You have no choice but to do that, and we will not have money then. Like, we won't have a firm figure. We'll have a better idea, but that target always moves. You have suggested that a rough split between teaching and non-teaching, a little bit more to the non-teaching, but a rough split, right? Do I have that right? Of the roughly 15 million that needs to be saved. So I think I heard said that if we were to get more money than we expect, that would first go toward the teaching positions. Is that correct? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I heard that, because I know I know there's work, and I want to thank Directors Vidal and Sloop for their current work legislatively, and the community, because I've heard from many community members who want to be involved in that as well, to try to help Salem think about that. So if we were to get more money, I understand that. I know that we have a possibly reinvigorated foundation. So in any, anyway, I just wanted to confirm that tonight from you.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the priority. And whenever we've had, more funds in our ending fund balance, or then, we've gone back and said yes to more, teaching positions to bring down class size. I will say another priority would also be those support staff who work directly with classroom teachers. So they're in that district-wide category. So when you think about a learning specialist who teaches special education, or an ELD teacher, someone who doesn't have the classroom with the students, but is responsible for direct instruction, intervention, special education, language development, OT, PT, they're actually in that district-wide category. So, if funding comes around special education, we'd have to, I don't know what the legislation would look like, but often legislation comes with requirements. And so sometimes we want to put it somewhere else, but the legislation tells us we have to designate it here or there. So learning specialists, or those who deliver specially designed instruction, may not always be classroom teachers, right? They might be in that other category. So depending on where the funding comes from, we may want to put it to reduce class size, and we may not be allowed to.
Okay. I just wanted
Yeah.
that clear. Thank you. That helps.
Yeah. And I would add that, last year with our $10 million reduction, the majority of that did go to district-wide positions, 8.5 million of that. So we did a lot of reducing, and,
Bless you.
as much of it where people will say, I didn't see it, and that was the whole point, is how could we reduce so that it didn't impact the day-to-day experience of a student? So when families say, I didn't see that reduction, I don't think the district made any, we made a lot. But we prioritized not putting it, in some of those direct places for students. There was the librarians going from 1.0 to 0.5. That was very visible. But a lot of other positions that weren't. Because we already trimmed 8.5 million in district-wide, finding another 7.5 million in a district our size is challenging. But we've committed to that regardless what happens tonight. We wanted to make clear that we want to keep as much of the reduction away from the classroom experience as possible in terms of class size.
All right. Kelly, look like you got something? Not yet? Does anyone else have anything? So we'll wait. You okay? So, what are you gonna say? No, she's good. At this point, for me, I'm ready for a motion. And if you all would like, I don't mind making the motion. It is not traditional, but right, you can, it doesn't matter to me. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make the motion that I'll move that we do not consolidate any of the 3 small primary schools for 2025-26 school year or the following year.
I second.
So now we can have discussion around not closing any of the 3 schools. Is there any topic or discussion for that?
Okay, I'll just
Yeah.
jump in. I think that I'm going to be voting in favor of this because of the community sentiment, the outpouring of community sentiment surrounding this. The process, the brevity of the process really concerns me. July 15th was when the Long Range Planning Committee first met regarding this, and now it's January 27th, and we're making this decision. I feel like it's too quick. I feel like we haven't looked at the third reason why I'm voting for this is alternative solutions. I don't think we have looked at that clearly enough. So those are the 3 reasons, and that's it.
All right. Anyone else?
So as a director and a public servant, I have the duty to act on the board governance, and that is the act of transforming the needs, wishes, and desires of the community into goals and policies that direct the schools in the community. My decision process also took into consideration the community input and the community support and trust for future bonds, and the uniqueness of these small schools have in our community. I know there's some students with special needs that have been widely accepted, and they have a strong sense of belonging. And because I have a just a heart for special education, these schools are doing it right, and they feel included, and they feel a sense of confidence and have friends, and they're thriving. And these are all 3 high-performing schools in our district. And I just hope that we can focus on highlighting that and increasing our enrollment, but also offering solutions, collaborating with the community on how we can address our budget shortfalls. And that would be hopefully with the legislative advocacy. Even Governor Kotek wants to expand the career pathway in the high schools. So there could be some additional funding with that as well. So I guess I will be voting in favor of not consolidating any schools.
Yeah, I'll also support the motion to not, I'll vote yes for the motion to not consolidate schools. Where I'm struggling is that I don't want to kick a can down the road. And I don't want to not make a hard decision if it's the right decision to make. And I don't want that to be the case. If I believed, if I had stronger belief that 425 was a good target size for our schools, if I was there, then I would support this. I don't know that well enough. I wonder what would have happened if in August we had said to the community, 425 is the right number. We're going to close the school. Let's go. You know, I don't know how that would have gone. I'm struggling with if our enrollment does not increase and we get farther down the road, I'm struggling with how we revisit this. And obviously we'll talk about a process and we'll talk about whether or not we want to recommend a process. We may not be here for that, but we have some good information about what 450 students would look like in a school. And in some ways, as I had a good conversation with Dr. Pryor about that, in some ways, that's a really good scheduling situation. And you can have really good schools there, given how successful some of our smaller schools are right now. I worry about that bump to bigger schools, given how successful the smaller schools are right now. So I'm interested in continuing this discussion about how we can do this if we need to do this in the future. I want to set up future boards and leaders for how to do this in a way that makes sense and works for everybody. But for the moment, I'm going to vote as you mentioned. I also want to just take a moment to say, for any community member who loves their school, the district leadership is part of that. So I know there's been some sense that the district, if they would only do this, you're doing an awful lot well right now if we have schools that are so beloved. So I'll stop with that.
I'll also support this, but I will caution that we are going to be back in this exact same financial situation a year from now with our budget. And 1.45 is going to look appealing. And so I would implore that as a board, that we figure out how to more successfully work with our community to have this conversation. I think we need to do a retro on this entire small schools process. And I think we need to figure out how to engage the full community on what it means to look at our boundaries and some of the things that our community has raised to us. Because it's not acceptable to have schools that are so widely different in the number of students that we have. And again, sacrificing one small school to solve our budget challenges is not appropriate. And I do worry, though, about what the community is going to say to us when our budget comes out and they see the class sizes that we are going to have in that budget. And I think as a board, we need to be ready to react because they are not going to be happy. And I really hope that the parents in this auditorium are ready to honestly say out to the community that the budget is a reflection of the commitment to students, because honestly, that is what we're voting on, because we're going to get a lot of pushback for the class sizes that we're going to fund in our budget. People are not going to be happy. But we have heard you and we value you and we value what you've said about how important your schools are, and we've heard you. So, but we're going to be right back where we are budget-wise, and we need to be ready for that, and we need to reflect on that for sure.
All right, Director Douglas, cast a vote. Oh, wait.
I just want to say again to the board, thank you for your extraordinary amount of time to this process. I know it was briefer than anyone would want, and some of that was outside of our control because we have a long-range plan that you asked to be updated, and the long-range planning committee had your March, spring, on the schedule and needed to know what direction it needed from the board. And a potential capital bond. So maybe unlike other school districts, there were some factors there that that brought it forward. But I want to thank you for your integrity with the process, for the extraordinary amount of time listening to the community, asking great questions of the staff to bring you information. And again, allowing us the opportunity, allowing us to not have to make a recommendation. That was really helpful for us as staff to be able to stay open to all of our schools and all of our staff, in the sense that you were really going to carry the load with this, and that we could focus on supporting schools and being in classrooms and not being inundated with questions about what are you going to decide. And I know that shouldering more of that decision, the five of you, and what that felt for you for the last few months. But I appreciate what that allowed our school principals to be able to focus on, and the rest of us as district leaders to be able to do the work. One of the parents sitting in the audience, I'm not sure if she's still here, had a public comment at one of our meetings around commending the advocacy that Director Sloop and Director Vidal have been doing at the state level, and wondering what could parents do. And I will say there is a gap there. Right now, legislators are hearing from school board members. They're hearing from the Oregon Education Association, which is licensed teachers, but they're not hearing from parents. So there's a PTA, an Oregon PTA, and I would hope that this community would now reach out to Oregon PTA and say, why are you not down at Salem? Or can we coalesce and have a movement down at Salem? Because we do need to get stories down there from parents. I think legislators often are much more moved by parents than they are by employees of school districts around state funding. So I would say that, and I want to again, on behalf of the staff, thank all of you for your leadership. And as we mentioned, we will respect any decision you make, and it's looks clear where this is going, and absolutely we respect it and work very hard for our students to have an incredible experience in school in the fall.
If you want to hold these nice people up, go ahead.
I would love to hold you up. All right. I wanted to let you know that Director Sloop and I were laser focused on this meeting, and we've been laser focused on it for the last month. And so we promise you that we will reach out to parents who are interested about the February 17th Advocacy Day at the Oregon State Capitol. So we will have more information to come. Thank you so much.
Okay. Director Douglas, would you please cast the vote?
Thank you. Director Shoemaker,
Aye.
Director Sloop,
Aye.
Chair Taylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wyatt,
Aye.
Director Vidal.
Aye.
Thank you.
No clapping, please. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. Come on, you guys ain't no fun. Well, before we go, this means that we do not need the meeting for tomorrow, correct? I guess I'd also challenge people in the room to not always jump to conclusions. I guess just wait for the process to play out. We heard from a lot of you, some of you not so nice, thinking that it was a predetermined thing, and it wasn't. It never was. We didn't know any more than you knew, and that was real, that was truthful, whether you believed it or not. And so we just ask that as you move forward and the board changes over, and that you give board members an opportunity to do their job and let a process play out, I guess. So with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.